All right, so when you think about where everything came from, you've probably got two big stories in your head, right? There's the religious one, divine creation, and then there's the scientific one, Big Bang, evolution, the whole deal. But what if there's a third story, a completely different take that kind of weaves together science and spirituality and this idea of consciousness? And here's the kicker. This story says you don't just live in the universe, you actually help create it. So let's dive into that. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big conflict this story is trying to solve. Then we're going to get into the really cool part, this incredible tale of a universe literally born from a dream. And most importantly, we'll figure out what all of this means for you right here, right now. Okay, so to really get this alternative story, we've got to first understand the problem it's trying to fix. And that problem is this massive clash between the two main ways we've been taught to see the world. So, in one corner, you've got the old school religious story. It tells us, hey, the universe is meaningful, there's a higher power, a grand plan. But then, in the other corner, you have the modern scientific story, which basically says, well, the universe is a random, meaningless accident. We're just a tiny blip in this huge, cold cosmos, and then it's over. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty big difference, right? And what's really fascinating is how we even got to this point. The sociologist Max Weber had this idea that modernity basically took our worldview, which used to be this one big unified thing, and just shattered it. It separated science, art, and morals into their own little boxes. And sure, that led to amazing progress in science and art, no doubt. But it also left this giant hole where our sense of meaning and purpose used to be. And that's where this third option comes in. It's from a pretty famous collection of writings called the Seth Material, and it offers what you could call a postmodern answer. Now, that just means instead of picking a side, science or religion, it tries to take the best parts of both and weave them back together into something new. Okay, here it is, the absolute core idea of this whole story. Ready? Consciousness isn't some random accident that popped out of a complicated brain. Nope, it's the source of everything. It's the fundamental fabric of the universe. Consciousness came first, and everything else, matter, energy, space, time, all of it is a creation of consciousness. So, how did it all happen? How did consciousness create everything? Well, this story doesn't start with a Big Bang. It starts with a dream. So, picture this. At the very beginning, or maybe even before the beginning, there's this primary source consciousness that the Seth Material calls all that is. You can think of it like this infinite cosmic mind. And its thoughts, its daydreams, its imaginations, they weren't just flimsy ideas. They were so powerful, so vivid and real that they basically couldn't be contained. They just had to burst out and become their own thing. And from that creative explosion from all that is, these little purposeful fragments shot out. They're called consciousness units, or CUs for short. Now, these aren't just dumb bits of energy. The idea is that they're tiny packets of consciousness, each with its own intent. They're the literal building blocks of matter. And here's where it gets wild, and sounds a lot like quantum physics. They act as both particles and waves, which means every single atom in the universe has its own little spark of consciousness. And this is the big twist. Let this sink in for a second. Our physical world, the one that feels so solid and real, it didn't start that way. It began as a subjective dream inside the mind of all that is. The act of dreaming itself was the original state of consciousness that literally built our reality, one conscious atom at a time. So the chain of events is pretty clear. A divine dream sparks conscious energy, and that energy forms our physical universe. Simple enough, right? But how does a dream become a solid world you can touch? Well, that's the next piece of the puzzle. So yeah, how does a dream become solid? According to this story, it's because our reality isn't actually as solid or as constant as we think it is. Not even close. I mean, to us, the world feels like it's always on, right? It's stable, it's just there. But this story suggests that on the most fundamental level, the universe is actually flickering. It's blinking on and off so fast that we can't possibly perceive it. So when it blinks off, where does it go? The idea is that reality is constantly flickering between our system and another one. Think of it like watching a movie. It looks like smooth, continuous motion, but we know it's really just a bunch of still pictures shown really, really fast. Well, in this model, our own consciousness is the projector that fills in the gaps between the frames, creating this seamless experience we call life. And it was out of this flickering primordial dream state that all life, us, animals, everything, began to kind of wake up and solidify into physical form. We developed our outer senses, sight, sound, touch, as the perfect tools needed to tune into and navigate this specific frequency of reality, this particular flicker rate. Now look, this is a really cool cosmic story, for sure. But the whole point of telling it isn't just to talk about the universe out there. The whole point is to bring it right back here, to you. So that leads to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? If this is how reality works, where do you fit into this picture? Well, according to this framework, the you that you think of as yourself, the one listening right now, is really just the tip of the iceberg. You're a multidimensional being. You have your everyday outer ego, that's your conscious self. But underneath that, there's an inner ego that communicates through gut feelings and intuition. You've got your subconscious, which acts like a bridge to these other deeper realities. And then, and this is the really mind-bending part, you have counterparts, which are basically other versions of you living out different lives in different times all at once. And all of this leads to one incredibly powerful point. If consciousness creates reality, and you are a piece of that consciousness, well then, your thoughts, your beliefs, your expectations, those are your tools. They are, quite literally, the building blocks you are using right now to build your personal experience of the world. Okay, but if you really have that kind of creative power, well, that comes with a massive amount of responsibility, doesn't it? Of course it does. And that's exactly why this whole philosophy comes with a really clear ethical framework to guide you. I mean, think about it. If your beliefs literally shape your reality, then you've got a responsibility for what you create. This isn't just some abstract theory to think about. It's a practical guide for how to use that power wisely. This ethical guide really boils down to 4 main ideas. The first one is simple, but it's huge. Thou shalt not violate. Basically, you have to recognize that all consciousness is sacred. The second is a direct challenge. Face up to the abilities of consciousness. In other words, own your power. Don't be afraid of it. The third asks you to be a practicing idealist. That means you don't just sit around wishing for a better world, you actively use your thoughts and beliefs to help build it. And finally, number 4, the ends never justify the means. The way you create something is just as important as the thing you create. And all of this leaves us with one final and very personal question. This whole story, this alternative creation myth, it places the power to create reality squarely in your hands. So, knowing that, what are you going to build next?